I can hear Zach.
I can hear
I
Zach.
can hear everything Zach's
Control's
saying.
attacking us.
This is an amazing
Control
head
is
fake.
attacking us.
Thank
I think
you,
it's
Control. Thank you, Control. Wow. Killing me. All right, take it from the top. Hello, welcome to the Hash. It's live, and we're doing that anyway. Danny Nelson, that guy's not usually here, but he is today. That's great. Will Foxley, he's usually here. Naomi, good to see you as always. Naomi with the first story. What's going on?
Question is Naomi usually here? It's a difficult question to answer. So, first story for the day. We're talking about an interesting product that Visa is coming out with. The payments behemoth Visa has apparently proposed a platform that will enable interoperability between central bank digital currencies and other stablecoins. The idea is that it would allow cryptocurrencies to be transferred between different blockchains. I mean, it seems kind of to me like it's like the Thor chain, except for like a super centralized version for super centralized products to be swapped. So I mean, it's kind of interesting. They're also saying that it would also provide access for private stable coins to be able to be interoperable with public CBDCs. But the way that they describe this process is kind of interesting. There's a lot to unpack here. They say it would be by providing permissioned access for whitelisted stablecoins to be interoperable. So there's a lot of words in there that we need to dive into. Zach, I'm going to throw this to you to start off with. What are your thoughts on this new platform that Visa is talking about?
Big year for Kai Sheffield at Visa. That's my top line. He's their crypto guy, and he keeps doing all sorts of stuff that gets the crypto people excited, or at least wondering what is going on over there. So this is on the heels of some USDC integrations. Obviously, they're looking at this future where CBDCs and private stablecoins are a bigger part of the mix, and they want that stuff to live on their rails. So the fact that they're getting ahead of this remains really interesting to me. And is interesting to see. Like, you know, we talk about bridge season in the context of like DeFi and like layer one and stuff, but it's like bridge season for Visa right now. What the? So just seeing this come out the gate is interesting. And again, speaks to sort of this distant future in which these coins are transacted more readily.
Yeah. I think that it's also interesting to look at this future divergence that we're starting to see play out. We always knew that cryptocurrency was this, permissionless system. It's going to be used by anyone who wants like freedom. And then there's going to be this legal layer as well. There's going to be this divide where some people are like, listen, I just want my money to be permissionless and uncensorable, and I'm just going to go with this thing that gives me financial sovereignty. But then there's going to be people who say, listen, I want to play by whatever the rules are. I want to follow them exactly. I want to make sure this thing is whitelisted. So the fact that Visa is talking about providing this permissioned access for whitelisted stablecoins really starts to lay out what this future is going to look like as governments start to have their blacklist and their whitelist, and they start to, dive into what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And then behemoths like Visa obviously are going to be playing by whatever rule books the governments lay out. And it's just a very different future where blockchain technology plays a big part in both, but they're just, in practice, they're just incredibly different. But I'll throw this to you, Will.
Yeah, I want to get Danny's thoughts on this as well, because he's been kind of covering the tracks for like the MasterCard scoop earlier in the year and more stuff relating to stablecoins in general. One question I have is just related to the trusted side of this whole issue. It says in the article that this is a trusted platform. And to what degree are we supposed to be trusting this, or to what degree are we not supposed to be trusting this is kind of the question I have. For example, what is the multi-sig behind this? Or is there a multi-sig rather? Is it like a 2 of 3, or is there like a confederation behind it? Who has access to whitelisting and blacklisting these things? Is Visa going to be like bringing in stable coins from all over different parts of the world and allowing those to interact together with private money? There's a lot of questions here. I do think that one thing that is really interesting, though, is that Visa did put out the smart contract that they're using on the first place on the Ropstein testnet, which is like a testnet for the Ethereum network. So if you want to go check out the code, you can. It's right there online. You can go play around with it, which is pretty interesting. But Danny, I'll throw it down to you.
Yeah, I think the thing that really stands out to me here is a topic I haven't really had to think about before, but it's that we could be going toward a future where you would have a stable coin that is actually backed by a central bank digital currency. Because, like, why not? If you have the USDC that's backed by dollars, well, let's say in 10 years there's a digital dollar. The digital dollar isn't, a government money that is backed by greenbacks in a bank somewhere. It would be itself the money. So that means that you could have a stable coin that is actually backed by a CBDC, which is, an interesting thing to think about the world we're going to. Another thing is, with this idea of a permissioned platform, even regulators and lawmakers who are pro crypto have been sounding more in favor of further regulation for the stablecoin industry. Yesterday, Senator Cynthia Lummis, who's probably the most ardent supporter of Bitcoin on Capitol Hill, said in a speech that she sees a future where stablecoins might have to be issued by banks or other very regulated entities, and that they should be very carefully monitored and audited. So even the most ardent supporters of crypto are looking toward a future where stablecoins will probably exist in a much more regulated environment, and that is probably going to play into the favor of a platform such as this.
Yeah, it's a lot to dig into. I mean, on that note, if we look at the history of fiat currencies around the globe, right? It's a very interesting phenomenon because we kind of think of them as these like free floating things, but they're not. They're entirely there's so much price control in there. You have tremendous reserves in like treasury that are just used to prop up currencies when they move in the wrong direction. There's the famous case of Soros shorting the British pound when he broke the Bank of England and basically broke the peg that England had set that was far too high. Like there's so much price fixing in traditional finance. And so then you have these things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these cryptocurrencies that are just freely fluctuating on an open market. And you kind of actually get an idea of what the true value is. But then you have stable coins come into the mix, which are something that's backed by something that is pegged and very tightly controlled in traditional markets. And now governments, I mean, they're looking at stable coins and they're saying, well, it needs so much regulation and oversight because we've got these tight controls in place and we want tight controls on the second layer as well. That digital token that's representing this tightly controlled thing underneath, it all just needs to be controlled. I mean, it really, again, it speaks to this divergence of these two worlds, this completely free fluctuating system and this one where government really, really wants to tightly control it. And I think that it's not because they want this freely fluctuating world to exist. If they could control that, they absolutely would. But the fact is there's no central party. There's nothing to peg. Like there is no one to control in this situation. They're trying to control the exchanges, but they're having a lot of difficulty doing that, especially now that DEXs are becoming more popular. And so it is very interesting just seeing that completely divergent paths. But we'll keep an eye on that. And speaking of complete control, let's go to China. So Will, what's happening there?
Amazing segue there. Perfect. So China's factories are struggling with an energy crisis brewing in the country. China is trying to import more energy from the north in Russia to kind of offset a lot of the lost electricity that they are needing to keep these factories going. A lot of these factories are shutting down. It's mostly like metal manufacturing kind of industries, and they're mostly smaller firms, but it is having a tremendous impact on the country itself, which of course is the second largest economy. And it's also mostly manufacturing-based economy. So if you're seeing like a dip in energy production or a dip in energy across the board, then you're going to see a dip in manufacturing, which just trickles down to people getting laid off, less food on the table, just issues across the board. So this is a pretty notable event because you're looking at a large economy that is struggling to keep energy flowing through the pipelines, rather. And it's touching the cryptocurrency industry as well. A lot of people are speculating that this is a big reason for why Bitcoin mining and Ethereum mining was kind of hacked away over the summer months. And that's why they're also looking at trying to dig into some other industries as well. There's been some reports that soybean manufacturers are also being cut off because they're just too energy intensive. So just to go back to Naomi, your point, complete control here, the CCP is trying to kind of look at this huge picture, look at all this population it has, all these industries, and figure out where can we stop some growth so that we can use this energy in the ways that it's going to help the most amount of people, which is a pretty tough way of looking at things. And I want to throw it to you first for your take on this story.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's so much to unpack here. What immediately struck me about this was just seeing in the past couple of years how fragile the supply chain is. I mean, if China shuts down production in their factories for certain products, everyone suffers. We have a completely interconnected world these days. No matter how much governments try to erect barriers and create all these, trade regulations that either stop or speed up trade between countries, they're trying to control that. But we're so interconnected. And this last year, I tried to buy a freezer at the start of 2020, and I think I had to wait until the very end of 2020 in order to get one. It's like they're completely sold out. That's one product. I could name like hundreds of products that just haven't been able to be found on the shelves, or it's very difficult. Like a lot of people in crypto, they're kind of looking at crypto and saying, well, I want the financial system. I want everything to collapse. I want to watch the world burn. I want this entire thing to be shaken up. I don't at all, because I see the tremendous value of these very fragile and precariously based systems. And you see what like a minor upset can do to shake everything up. It's like, well, China has some energy shortages. Suddenly everyone loses components for all of their products. What is comforting about crypto is that I think that this shakeup was going to come anyway. I think that we're headed for a complete disruption because the system that we've set up is very, very fragile and vulnerable. But the good thing is that we do have things like cryptocurrency to help us store our value if such a shakeup and such a catastrophe happens. So that's kind of where my head is at. But I mean, this whole story is pretty interesting and is kind of scary. But Danny, I'll throw it to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the crypto mining ban that came earlier this year, that from what I was hearing, at least part of the thought behind that process, behind that decision rather, was just the fact that that crypto mining was taking up so much energy, and that is when you need energy, and it's going toward some activity that is not seen as productive to the wider plan, the 5-year plan, as would be the case for China, I believe. That is an industry that you're going to want to clamp down on, and you're going to want to be able to redirect that power elsewhere. So crypto mining is really only a small part of a much bigger story, like an infrastructure, societal story that's going on in China. But it's good context to see the different cogs at play here.
Yeah, just to kind of pick up on what you're saying there's been a lot of tension within China over the last year. I think it's something that we've talked about in the hash multiple times over and over again is tech stocks and technology companies are facing tremendous pressure from the CCP. We've seen like Didi, which is like an Uber-esque app in China, be curtailed by the central government there. Now you're seeing on the energy front that because of a lack of energy, they're having to crack down on certain industries. And they're going after the ones that are easy. Bitcoin mining is probably the easiest one to go after. And then you kind of go down your list afterwards. But there's a lot of pressure across the board. Naomi, you also touched on the supply chain issues. We've seen a lot of talk about semiconductors. And the UK has had to cut down a lot of its production of automobiles because they don't have the chips from China to be able to make them. So it's interesting to see like the role that China plays on the manufacturing side and how that relates to the cryptocurrency industry as well. Zach, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, for me, the big picture here is just these interconnected systems. I think, everyone sort of naturally gets kind of like locked into their own lane. Like we become really focused on crypto. We could become really focused on whatever your passion or your profession is. But when you kind of zoom out and you look at like the way these global systems are related, it's really eye-opening to me. And I think what this is really illuminating for like China's crypto crackdown, right? We hear about the China Bitcoin ban and we assume that it's just about this one thing, when in reality, it's about a totality of things that a national government is trying to tackle. So to me, that's what these stories offer, is that moment to be like, oh wait, cryptocurrency isn't something that is completely parallel to the real world. It is rooted in the real world, and it is rooted to political realities, economic realities, all the way down the line. And that's what this story is to me. It's just that moment to zoom out and be like, okay, yeah, this is a global system.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I mean, if you look at the state of the economy across the globe, if we can sort of draw similarities between different countries' economies, I mean, in China, you've got that big Evergrande catastrophe, which is this giant real estate company that is on the brink of default. Then the government is talking about bailing them out. You know, what do we need to do to start paying off their debts? Because if they start defaulting, it'll be a catastrophe. So the Chinese government's printing a bunch of money to bail out this company, which was clearly badly managed. And so there's another augmentation in the market that they're feeding rather than just letting correct itself. And then you've got China also printing money, and they're just buying US bonds while the US government is printing a ton of money so that they could just, you know, create and bail out whatever bad businesses they want to bail out. It's just this very circular system where everyone's printing out money and buying each other's things. And the only reason that there's some sort of equilibrium is because every government seems to be doing the same thing. They all seem to be, you know, printing this money, devaluing everyone's money and redistributing it into these failed businesses and bad schemes that shouldn't be propped up. And it all has to come to a head at some point. And I'm wondering whether all of these signs of distress that we're seeing in the economy and in, you know, global marketplace is suggesting that that's on the horizon. But it's a lot to think about. Let's think about that over the break. Zach, what's coming up next?
More like Nevergrande, am I right? Oh yeah, got it.
Zing.
Zing, boom, put on the board. Yeah, okay, sorry, I'll leave now. When we get back, we'll talk about another flub. This one from DeFi Money Market Compound. So stick with us. It's The Hash. Hope you're having a good one.
Egg time.
All right, so last night we were looking at this story, and Compound, which is one of the most prominent DeFi platforms in the world, had a bit of an issue. Something with its comptroller contract went wrong, and all of a sudden, comp tokens were flowing out in ways that they shouldn't have been flowing out. People were claiming $27 million worth of comp tokens in one transaction that we saw last night, and Compound founder Robert Leshner said, hey, yeah, there's like $80 million at risk here. And also we have to go through a 7-day governance process to figure this out. So this is DeFi in action, the experimental world of DeFi, and we get to see the latest mix-up. I'm going to toss this to Will. Compound has really avoided, I think, high-profile flubs in the past 18 months or so. So this one was striking. But what was your initial thought when you saw this one?
Yeah, exactly what you're saying right there. Compound is one of those blue chip DeFi markets out there that hasn't had any issues to date, but it makes sense it's having issues now. And the reason for that is it's fully transferred the power of governance and implementation of new code into its community hands. Beforehand, it was very much so in the hands of Compound Labs, which is more of a professional team kind of developing that code, pushing that into production, pushing it forward so people can take out loans in a peer-to-peer fashion. Now it's in the community's hands. And as we're seeing, decentralized governments gets pretty messy. So what happened here is that the controller in this governance system broke. There was literally 2 lines of code that were incorrect. And someone noticed it a few weeks ago, tried to get a patch implemented, but just because of the governance structure, it didn't get noticed, didn't get pushed forward. And so a new proposal went into production that shouldn't have gone into production and allowed for people to take out comp tokens, which is the governance token for the whole system, without having to go through the proper process for doing so. So it's notable to see that like we have this new DeFi ecosystem that is going to go through multiple maturation systems or multiple maturation. I can't figure out the word right now, but just it's going to go through a lot of processes. Yeah, I'm struggling right now, but it's going to keep going through these things. And it's not just about like the first iteration, right? Compound Labs put out a great product, gave up tons of loans over the years or over the months, no issues. Goes to a decentralized governance system, it's going to have problems. Last thing I would say though, it is interesting to look at this from they have 7 days to figure this out and kind of like create a patch before it goes into production. And people can be stealing money stealing, I guess. Kind of depends on how you view the whole problem. It's very similar to the DAO hack in 2016, where there was like a 30-day window where they had to figure out what to do with the whole issue. They decided to roll back the whole Ethereum blockchain at the time. Can't really do that on Compound because it's a layer 2 dApp. So you can't really do anything on that front. But you do have like this open period where money is just going to be stolen. And there's not a lot you can do except for lobby people not to take money out of the system. But Naomi, going to throw it to you.
Yeah, I think their governance system is really interesting. About a year ago, I interviewed Robert Leshner, and he was chatting about this move towards a more decentralized process. And it was all wrapped in this idea that this is beneficial to everyone. This is the path forward. I agreed with him. You know, decentralization is better. If you can take that control out of the hands of developers and give it to a decentralized community, I love that ethos. I think we're increasingly moving in that direction. And I want to see more of that. You know, the decentralization of control. And then situations like this come up and you're like, oh, it's a trade-off. It's definitely a trade-off. You know, the fact that they have a 1-week process, that's really interesting. And a lot of platforms have that, this idea that it takes a while for things to be vetted and go through and implemented. And I mean, there are some platforms that kind of have this hybrid model where you have this governance process, but there is a capacity for teams to overrule it. Again, it's such a trade-off, and it really needs to be analyzed, because if you can overrule it in a case like this bug, you save a platform and save all of this money from getting stolen. But if you have the ability to overrule something, it's not decentralized at all. It's kind of just lip service to decentralization. So, I mean, as you said, Will, this industry needs a lot of maturation. They need to figure out how to handle things like this. Maybe there needs to be a longer vetting process before things get put in. Maybe there needs to be a system for prioritizing or creating a hierarchy of bugs and things to be pushed so that they don't go unnoticed. If a patch was suggested and it was just ignored, well, there's definitely something wrong with the way that system is running right now. So it'll be interesting to see how they figure that, you know, how they change things. The only way to change things now is to go through the governance process, the 1-week process, get feedback from the community, try and get a majority to put whatever change they want through. So it'll be up to the community to kind of form a consensus around what a good path forward is. And when you have groups deciding on what the best path forward is, it often doesn't lead to the best outcome. Sometimes it's just the lowest common denominator. What's the thing that we can get everyone to agree on? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But yeah, I really like Compound. It's sad to see a bug like this, which is pretty catastrophic. But Danny, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, or this is just a reminder that, or Zach. Yeah, Zach, take it from here.
You go first, Danny.
Danny, you got it.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just thinking this is just a reminder that governance is messy, and when you have this distributed system for making decisions, it's you almost still need someone to be held accountable, or at least to understand that, like, all right, we need to have a triage mechanism in place. So if we know that there's some issue coming down the pipeline, we are able to act ahead of time to fix it. I hadn't realized that this was an issue that had been flagged in the days running up to it. And so, you know, this is going to be this is a pretty stark example of the importance of accountability. I'm not quite sure how you enforce accountability when you have a governance model that is, in some respects, the opposite of that. But it is an important thing to keep in mind for a Compound and for really all projects.
Yeah, just to
I just have a question for you. Sorry, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, really quick. I'd say that the responsibility, it moves away from the founders and the people who implemented the project and moves on to the token holders, because they get punished in the price. So that's why this whole DAO experiment very much so depends on tokens. If you don't have people who are responsive to price movements, they're not going to have DAO inputs. You're not going to have people working within DAOs to figure things out. So you really have to have those two correlations tight together. And I think we'll see more of that over the next few years as DAOs and tokens become bigger things. Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to know, is there a place for a white hat hacker to come in and save the day with this? Like, is there a fixed amount of Compound token that can be stolen? Or is this just an infinite thing that can keep happening? Because, I mean, if there's a fixed amount, it makes sense that someone would come in, take it all, say, fix the system, and then I'll give it all back. But instead, the fact that they're relying on appealing to the community and saying, please don't steal our stuff, that seems like it's a disaster. So am I understanding it correctly that there is no fixed cap and no capacity for this? Zach, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, Leshner said last night that it only will affect something like 280,000 comp tokens. So there is like a window. That's a big amount of money. That's a very large amount of money. It's worth noting that this is a platform that has $10 billion in crypto assets committed to it. So this is not a bank breaking amount of money. If we're talking about $80 million, probably less now that the price of comp is tanking. Well, not tanking, but is sinking. It may not break the bank here, but it's interesting to see these things get worked out in real time. And I think Will's point is very apt, right? This is a voter turnout issue, right? This is a governance. This is like voter participation. We call these things governance tokens, but for most people, they are tokens that retain value and can be spun into other value, whether you want that in fiat or some other token. So just because you have the governance token doesn't mean that you're participating in governance like many people in many governance systems in the traditional world as well. So hopefully we'll see a way to incentivize people to actually use their tokens for good and cast their vote to get these fixes resolved. But I'll toss it back to Naomi for a last thought.
Yeah, I just have real quick final words about that point, Zach. Governance. It's so hard just to get people to turn out for voting in our traditional political system. You think that they're going to turn out for voting for the 100 tokens that they hold? Because we're always talking about having a seat at the table and how important it is for us to have a say and contribute to this system. And it's like, you know what? I disagree. People don't care. People don't want to spend their lives wondering what proposals are being put through. You have a tiny fraction of people who are keeping an eye on this stuff, who are benefiting or who are moving projects in a certain direction. But most people are living their lives and they have full-time jobs and they don't even have time to go to the post office, and pick up something in their lockbox. I'm not even speaking for a personal experience, or maybe I am. But like this stuff is just like the idea that we want to have control sounds good in theory. And in practice, no, people don't actually want to have control over the governance of this stuff. They just want something that's easy and they're probably looking at it to make money. But Zach, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, the flip side is the system that we have now where these decisions are actually governed by big holders, whales, early investors, and people on the team, and you end up with a bit of decentralization theater. So hopefully that nut can get cracked in a way that's meaningful for these systems as they grow. I'm going to toss this to Danny. Danny, let's talk about some other stuff. What do you got?
Yeah, let's talk about jobs. Speaking of those full-time employment opportunities, a lot more of those are coming these days into crypto. That's a good segue. Anyway, everything's pointing towards a boom in the crypto hiring sector. There's some reports out there that a popular crypto jobs board has seen 1,500% growth as everyone in the industry and companies that are thinking about participating, maybe for the first time, are looking to beef up on talent. I've been watching the jobs boards personally. That's part of what I do here for CoinDesk. And I see, Coinbase is always hiring for every position in every place. Gemini's hiring, Binance US is hiring, and Accenture and all the consultancies, they're hiring too. They're all trying to bulk up on staff to get that talent into this industry because it's such a popular opportunity. I've been in crypto for 2 years now. I feel like I've been in the trenches for so long. I'm amazed to see the growth that we're seeing now. I'm going to toss it over to you, Zach. What's your perspective on all this?
And my perspective is that's a lot of hiring scoops for you to find there, Danny. And I'm just worried that you're not going to be able to keep up with these staggering percentage amounts. I mean, come on, we need to find another person scouring the job boards.
I was working on one earlier today. Don't you worry.
Nah, I can't do that. Alpha for the hash viewers. Tell us the scoop. All right, I won't hold you to it. But yeah, it is interesting to see this really ramp up. And you're right, it's really across the board from the crypto natives all the way to the biggest firms on Wall Street. And I think a lot of, from our perspective, these are really interesting signals in terms of where the market is moving and where the interest is on the hiring side from these established firms. So a lot of good stories in there. I hope we capture some slice of that 1,500% growth. But I'll toss it up to Will.
Yeah, so I have a question for everybody. I think when I first got into Bitcoin and crypto and told people about it, it was normally like, oh, you're doing Bitcoin stuff. Like, it was pretty pathetic. I feel like that's kind of changed. I'm wondering, what's your reception when you tell people that you do stuff in Bitcoin? Has it been like mostly positive? Has it been, just positive, I guess? Danny, what's your thoughts?
I no longer describe myself as primarily as a finance reporter. If I'm talking to my parents' friends, perhaps a year or two ago, I would have said, I'm a finance reporter. Then if they start asking questions, I I go mimble wimble crypto, fake internet money. But now it's completely changed. I'm like, oh, I'm in crypto. I usually still lead for those types of people with Bitcoin because it's just a simpler way of describing the industry, even though it's much larger than that. But I would say, at least personally, the manner with which I describe it has changed because the reaction it elicits is different. It still might be scoffs, but maybe there's a bit more jealousy in the scoff these days.
Here. That's a great question, Will.
Envy.
Good response by Danny. It is funny, like, that the career risk around crypto has really receded in recent years. I think like there are some places where the career risk of being in crypto is still an issue, but it seems like everyone seems to be embracing this thing and there's more comfort. But I'll toss it to you, Naomi, for the last thought.
Yeah, just final thoughts. This isn't something that's particular to the crypto markets, I might add. If you look in software at the moment, everyone is trying to hire. There are no jobs available. Everyone is trying to find developers. They just don't exist. I've been trying to find writers and producers. I know that, CoinDesk is constantly looking for good people for their teams. Like, just jobs in tech in general, but also just like construction where I live. Like, I mean, it's crazy how short the supply is right now. I wonder if that just speaks to us becoming more prosperous as a country. It's just very, very difficult to find people who want jobs, and there are lots and lots of jobs on offer. There should be no unemployment right now because I just see wanted signs everywhere I go. It's gotten worse during the pandemic. Obviously, if you're getting unemployment benefits, that you don't need to look for a job. That's what the feedback has been from a lot of the businesses that I've been talking to in the area. But even that has stopped now, and you're still seeing all these wanted signs. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it definitely is interesting and difficult for anyone running a business. But on that note, Zach.
All right. Email me, zach@coindesk.com, if you're a DeFi degen and you want to write about this crazy space. We'll hire you. Oh, Control just tells me we want a booking producer. If you have a solid Rolodex and like making calls, hit me up, zach@coindesk.com, ZACK@coindesk.com.
Just dox your email.
All right. Our director is saying that they have to use her referral code so that she gets the bonus. Yeah, classic. Way to go, Teresa. All right. Well, that's the show for today. We're going to wrap it there before Control cuts us right off to black. I'm Zach Seward. We got Will Foxley today, Danny Nelson, Naomi Brockwell, solid squad. Thanks so much. We'll see you Friday, and you have a great day. It's The Hash, CoinDesk.com. It rules.